Well, last week, the Nintendo Switch turned 6 years old, which means we're in year 7 for this platform without any substantial mid-generation refresh or any of that, and no price drop. The system has continued to cruise along, selling millions and millions of units every single quarter. Well, naturally, you're starting to see some questions come up online around a Switch 2 for the next generation platform, and you've probably noticed it's kind of been accelerating more over the past few months, and a lot of that just has to do with the age of the system. And we've had some, I'd say, some speculative topics, backwards compatibility, the concept, even the chip inside of this new system. But today, I wanted to go over really a point in time, or 2 points in time, you should be looking towards for Nintendo to actually say something official around what's next after the Switch, as I'm sure that's what many people are wondering about. When will Nintendo actually say something about this platform? So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it, subscribe if you're new, and we're going to start today with this video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Factor. Look, we're all busy, and sticking to your nutritional goals can be tough. Going to the grocery store and then cooking and cleaning, that can take hours of your time. That is where Factor comes in. You can have fresh, never frozen meals delivered right to your doorstep from a selection of chef-prepared weekly options, with meals ranging between keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and protein plus options, so there's something for everyone. Factor also has more than 36 different sweets, smoothies, and juices for add-ons. To me, the best part is I can have a meal ready in a few minutes. Usually, I'll have a Factor meal for lunch since I can drop it in the microwave and have a delicious meal ready to go in no time. And cleanup, it's a breeze, so I'm on with my day while sticking to my nutritional goals. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code SpawnWave50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. That's factor75.com or click the link below and use code SpawnWave50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. So every single March, we do talk about the Switch turning 1 year older, but something else happens in March, and it does line up pretty well with the Switch's birthday, and that has to do with Nintendo's fiscal year ending. In fact, that will happen again this year, March 31st. So in just a couple of weeks now, we will be ending their current fiscal year and starting their next one that will run until March 31st, 2024. And with that means that Nintendo will eventually release financial results and even have some Q&A and something that is a big gathering of their shareholders, and they'll have a huge event that happens, and we actually get quite a bit of information from all of this. Well, first things first, we have to understand when that's going to happen. And if we take a look here over on their investors relations, they do have their calendar set up, and they've recently updated it to reflect when they're going to release the earnings report for this current fiscal year that'll have ended by then, but May 9th, and that falls in line with typically when they do it. So May 10th, for example, for 2022 is when they released the previous fiscal year's results. So what happens here when they'll release that is they'll show off how many systems they were able to sell, which generally they'll come in, you would expect, around the number that they've been forecasting, because they can kind of play around with those numbers as the year goes on. And in fact, they have been doing this most recent fiscal year and actually lowering the overall forecast and expectation by 1 million units almost every quarter or so. And I'm thinking they're going to hit that amount probably dead on, even though I do look around and kind of see the momentum for the platform slow, as you would expect after selling 124 million units or so, and again, into the 7th year of the platform. So that is pretty natural, and they're also going to show up with forecast for the next fiscal year that will be a couple of months into, almost, by the time they release that information. And I think they're going to show up with a number that's good for a system in its 7th year, but one that I'm sure will pale in comparison to previous quarters and previous years for the Switch, which, I mean, has been through the roof phenomenal. It's difficult to compare it to anything else really on the market now. But nonetheless, investors, I'm sure, will look at that and start asking some questions, we'll say, when it comes to the future of Nintendo, which is what leads us to the general meeting of the shareholders. And this is an event that, I mean, you can see right here, they've held the last week of June, and that's what we would expect this year for the 83rd general meeting of the shareholders. And you can go through some of the things that they have here with a bunch of information, but the part that people look towards where you can actually get some fun little bits of info is from the Q&A section. And that's actually where we've been getting a lot of information from like Miyamoto or Koizumi or Furukawa in this case as the president of Nintendo. And you'll have all kinds of weird questions being asked. This is where the person showed up, I assume bought enough stock in general, I think it was like $40,000, and asked about older properties like F-Zero, and I think Batten Kaitos was in there, which, remember, there were some talks about people observing that Miyamoto was kind of smiling a bit there. Batten Kaitos coming up, right? But, you know, maybe there was also some nostalgia that kicked up there with someone just randomly asking about these older intellectual properties at the general meeting of the shareholders during their Q&A section. However, based on the fact that most likely Nintendo, while they do have Zelda coming up a couple of weeks after they have their financial report release, this will take place after The Legend of Zelda has released, and there's really just Pikmin coming up. Except we could also have a direct around E3 time that maybe sets up the rest of this year. However, if we get to the general meeting of the shareholders and there has been no indication or mention from Nintendo about the next platform after this current Switch, there's a good chance they're going to be grilled in some way about the future of the company and what Nintendo's plans are to get the numbers back up. I mean, that's really what investors care about. They're generally looking for just continuous growth indefinitely. I mean, this is the place where we've had Miyamoto talk about backwards compatibility, mention, it's easier than ever, but also we don't want to kind of pigeonhole ourselves into a certain concept or box if we believe we can do more with the hardware, which is what they have their software tied to. They make hardware that's unique and then create software that basically sells the idea to the general masses and takes advantage of some of the unique aspects of it. We've also seen them talk about their Nintendo Switch Online, and yes, at times already mention kind of their next generation plans or just plans going forward after the current Switch system. And I think this is also where we heard that the system was halfway through its life cycle, and that was like a year and a half ago. So I still think they could get 10 years out of the Switch because you figure there's going to be a couple of years when it comes to just cross-generation. But general meeting of the shareholders will, I think, be a big moment for Nintendo, specifically talking about the Switch 2 or the next generation system. But also, you want to keep in mind that with their forecast, they may let on a bit about their plans for the next 10 months then after that information comes out, because we're still trying to figure out if they are going to follow the same path that they did with the Switch and not necessarily launch in a holiday time period for the platform, or if they're going to go back to the more traditional launch window, which tends to be Q3 for their fiscal year, that being between October and December. Now, with all of this said, there's a chance that Nintendo can just randomly show up one day and drop a trailer, kind of like the Switch where they had the rooftop parties and the person going from their living room to the park back to their living room, and this is the Switch, here's the concept, and then they say, we'll see you later on in the year or something to really go over all the features and launch lineup and extra games and all of this. So I do want people to keep that in mind. Nintendo can legitimately just announce it whenever they want, but I do look at these two dates as really times where Nintendo may kind of be forced into answering some questions or let on some information, again, officially, not just from a 4chan post or something. This is where Nintendo will show up with the hard numbers and probably answer some hard questions. I will say this, for anyone who's thinking or hoping that there would be a new Switch generation launching this holiday 2023, and I've seen people talk about this, speculate on this whole thing, which, yes, some of this came from that 4chan Pokemon post that seemed to reference a patch that would be included for, I guess, just HD visuals or higher resolution visuals and all these different things, right? But if they show up to this shareholders meeting and there has been no talk about what's after this current Switch, and they leave the meeting without really saying much there, then I'll tell you now, that happening at the end of June, I would not expect Nintendo to try to make a big push for the holiday season with a new system. There just wouldn't be enough time at that point. And to be honest, if they do want to launch in a holiday season and go back to that traditional time period, could be looking at holiday 2024. And I do wonder if that is the point where people are going to look at the Switch as being a bit long in the tooth, more so than they do now. And hey, look on the bright side. That means we're getting closer and closer to the speculative side of the Switch 2. All that conversation and talk to fade away, and we actually get into some official information from Nintendo and the eventual reveal and build up to the release. It's going to be exciting when that does happen. So I understand there's a lot of anticipation and excitement that is building now. So we'll see what Nintendo has planned, especially up until the general meeting of the shareholders, as we're all expecting some sort of direct to fit in there around E3 time. At least we expect sometime in June prior to all the investors showing up and then grilling Nintendo about what's after Zelda and technically Pikmin. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.